What's up guys, it's Monday and we're back with another episode of Design Over Time. This is a daily design show where we talk about just about any topic that's related to game design or games, and we do it daily so that we can keep up with these really complex things and tackle them in nice bite-sized chunks. So I'm your host, Richard Terrell. I go by Kirby Kid online, that's my Twitter as well. So yeah, over the weekend I stumbled upon this Reddit thread and I want to show you what it looks like. And as you can see, it looks like they are tackling a game design topic every week or so, and they have people respond. It's a neat little thread under our game design. You might want to check it out yourself. But the topic for this week was Spelunky and quote-unquote the clock. But really what they're talking about is this ghost that comes around at the 2.5 minute mark. I want to show you what that looks like. So yeah, when you're playing Spelunky, you go in, and every time you enter the first level, everything is randomly generated. And right here, I've never seen this level before, no one has. Every time you play, it's different, and you really only have one life to try to get all the way to the end of the level with as much points as possible. So, as you're exploring and dodging dangers like that, and getting hit by some of them, you'll get your way from the top of the level to the bottom. Pretty simple. Hopefully I'll survive. You take fall damage, there's enemies everywhere, you have to be kind of careful. So then, after about a 2.5 minute mark, you see something that says a terrible chill runs up your spine, and all of a sudden this ghost appears. And you cannot hurt this ghost. You cannot bomb this ghost, you can hardly do anything to it, and as you can see it goes up and through the level elements. And this game is a particularly deadly game. You don't have a lot of health and just about anything can kill you from a rogue mistake, but this ghost in particular is a one-hit kills. Yep. So, even though it looks really dangerous, this is about all it does. It slowly moves at you. And it's really not that scary at all. Alright, so here are the notes. So the questions in the original Reddit thread are bolded. I'm just going to answer them and kind of jump right off and run along with the topics, and we'll see what happens. So the first question is, what purpose does the ghost serve in Spelunky? So my response is, like in Super Mario Bros. Or other roguelikes, Mario Bros. Isn't a roguelike, but other roguelikes other than Spelunky, the right way to play an action game is to move through it briskly, taking risks for fun and for glory. The timer prevents players from going too slowly in order to avoid risk. That's the basic idea. So if you give players too much time, they'll probably play a little bit more chicken than necessary. They will take their time, they will size up the challenges, they'll probably take every element one by one just to avoid the risk and the pain of dying and losing. But the timer adds this element where if you have to go and beat this level in a certain amount of time, you can't explore leisurely, you can't take everything too slowly, you have to kind of move at some kind of decent pace. And that's exactly what timers like Super Mario Bros. Does to the gameplay experience, and it's also what the ghost does to Spelunky. So yeah, I wrote an article a long time ago. This is the hardback prints of my blog. This is the volume 1 edition, so these are the earlier stuff. But I wrote an article called Tension, Threats, and Timers. And I'll put the link down into the description for this article. But it just talks about the various different types of timers in the game and how they create tension and how they kind of affect gameplay, game design, player motivation, all that stuff. So, but that's the basic idea. It's something we should all be familiar with. Let's go to the next point. What would happen in Spelunky if you remove the ghost? And my easy answer is boringness. Players would systematically and safely comb through the level for gold or gems, and this is not good for an action game or a high score game. Essentially we'll talk about it a little bit later, but it would lower the skill ceiling way low as far as high score goes. And you really don't want your high score chasing runs to be about doing things as slowly and as safely as possible. You kind of want players to take their own chances with risk reward and be like, well, if I go a little faster or if I be a little riskier, I'll get greater rewards. And you just don't want that entire experience to drag out longer and longer for greater and greater benefits. But the basic idea is, if you create the opportunity for players to sort of comb the skill floor and do really well, that's not very good in a competitive environment. Or when you're talking about a high score chasing game like Spelunky, it is a competitive environment. We're talking about leaderboards and stuff. So we don't want to give players the leisure to explore at their leisure in Spelunky. We always want there to be an edge of danger, an edge of tension, some kind of pressure to move forward through the game. And I think that's good for a lot of reasons, you know. So what changes would be needed to compensate for the removal of the ghost? I can change this. Ghost. And I say you can't really compensate for it without adding something that functions in the same exact way. Timers are really great for that in Mario Brothers. I mean, it's the clock right at the top, you see it ticking, and you're like, okay, that's all the time I got to get through this level. Pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy to understand. Anything else you try to use is going to be more and more complicated in terms of programming it and getting the players to understand it. So I say you can't compensate without adding something that acts the same way. The levels can get dark after a while in Spelunky, or enemies can turn into crazy versions of themselves if you leave them alive for too long in the level, but essentially that's the same thing. The game gets more dangerous after a certain amount of time. But you have to have something in the game that encourages you to keep moving, and that's just one idea. So then the next question. What are the positives and negative effects of the clock? Which I will change to ghost again. The ghost in Spelunky is designed well only for low-level play. It is not well designed for high-level play. Ghosting is a neat idea with a poor balance. People often talk about how there's risk-reward for ghosting, but it's not that hard. The strategy that you use is repeated throughout just about every level in the game and every level type, and the ghost is a slow-moving and predictable enemy. So the ghost can be mastered, and from there it just becomes a simple routine that takes a lot of time to execute and rewards the player too highly for such a simple and relatively easy strategy. Ghosting also drags the game down for serious players. To do it well, you have to get rid of as many unique level elements by destroying them or maneuvering around them, and this essentially means you're not engaging with the level. So in order to ghost well, you essentially have to clear everything out and say, like, no levels, no crazy platforming, no enemies, no traps, nothing. Get all of that out and then let me play around with this really slow, dumb enemy for 7 minutes. Yeah, like I say here, from here players can take up to 7 extra minutes per level manipulating the ghost with little to no risk, and I've seen many runners and other players practically halt their progress to ghost. And so I didn't exactly specify, but the reason that players do ghosting is because if a ghost passes on top of a gem, which is a collectible like a coin in Mario Bros, but they're a high value collectible. If the ghost passes over it with its translucent body, it actually changes that gem to a diamond, which is worth a lot more money. So if you are going for high score, you really need to take every single gem possible that you find. Don't grab it initially, wait till the ghost comes around, let the ghost touch it, and then pick it up, and that's what is called ghosting, okay? So it's not just about the ghost being a one-hit kills enemy, it's not just about it floating through the level, it's really about getting points, and that's the only reason we're discussing ghosting in the first place, because otherwise players would quickly get through the levels and that wouldn't be a problem at all. So let's look at what a speedrun version of Spelunky looks like. This is a player who is not interested in just about anything that the game has to offer in terms of high score or killing enemies to fill out the achievements or doing anything like that. All this player wants to do is get through the game as quickly as possible. So as you can see, with a little bit of luck, the player finds a teleporter and a jetpack. So that's super good luck. And by really aiming the teleporter well, the player can get down through the level and across the level really, really quickly. So that's why this particular video is a world record or a former world record speedrun attempt. So as you can see, skipping a lot of the stuff that makes the levels challenging and difficult, but definitely using a lot of, taking advantage of the luck, but also using some pretty skilled teleporting to get the job done. But this player is stopping to hesitate for almost nothing, right? Getting through the level, getting through the game, that's the primary concern. And as you can see, each level takes about 5 seconds or so, so that's really something special. But let's contrast that with what we see here. So yeah, in this high score run in particular, you see this player, and as you can see, the player is finding all the gems in the level. So initially the player goes through the entire level, uses this pickaxe, which is pretty lucky that the pickaxe was available, and then carefully manipulates all the gems and all the pots and all the items in the level in the first initial 2 minutes and 30 seconds. In about 4 seconds the ghost is going to appear, and then we're going to see what ghosting looks like from high level play. So as you can see, all the gems are left in the field. All the traps have been disabled, and now it's just a matter of slowly guiding the ghost around to every single one of these spots that have a gem and waiting for the ghost to touch it. Now the ghost is a one-hit kill, so if the player gets touched by the ghost at any point in this entire run, the entire run is over. But the ghost is slow, and it's not really scary once you can predict its movements 100%. So as you can see, the ghost touch that blue gem and that gem over here, and they become diamonds. You're going to see it a little bit more clearly right here. As he flies up, the ghost touches those, and all of a sudden they're diamonds. He's going to touch this blue gem, it's going to turn into a diamond. And you can imagine that this sort of farming, if you will, this sort of repetitive strategy that gains sort of these virtual rewards is very far removed from what makes Spelunky fun and interesting. I mean, this level has no enemies, and the player did a little to clear it out of all the hazards ahead of time. And all the player is going to do now is take the next 6 minutes for this first stage of the game, that instead of being in it in about 10 seconds, it's going to take a total of 9 minutes to beat this level. And it's never going to get any more dangerous than what you see here. It's never going to get any more interesting. It's just slowly moving the ghost around, dropping all the pots in the same area, making sure that the gems fall, collecting the gems in the same place, and then running from the ghost, because the ghost is extremely predictable, extremely slow, and not very threatening despite having a one-hit kills design. This entire high score run takes 3 hours and 11 minutes. The speed runs take about, 3 to 7 minutes total for the entire game. So that is the major difference in timing between going for score and going for speed. And I don't think this is very interesting. I mean, this strategy is just super simple, but we'll get into that in a second. I'm going to pause this and we'll go back to the notes. So just addressing this one topic in Spelunky, we've touched a little bit on, here we go, gameplay elements. We touched on various systems and rules here in this light blue color. We touched a little bit on difficulty design. We touched a lot on design space. Whenever we talk about balance, we're really talking about the emergent whole, which is the product and the result of a lot of different elements. So you always need to think about the entire design space when you're talking about balance. So that's why that topic touched here. So right now we're going to talk about specifically the enemy design of the ghost, the design of the ghost AI, its behavior, its hitboxes, all of that, to try to figure out how it fits into the design space discussion, the balance of the game overall. If you think about this from a game design perspective, and you want engaging with the ghost to be balanced with risk reward and variation throughout a run, here are some of the changes that I came up with that you might want to consider. Because right now I say the ghost is extremely boring. So what if the ghost interacts with more elements than just the gym? So like perhaps it can spawn enemies like Olmec, or perhaps when it passes over specific level elements, it makes them dangerous versions. Like let's say the arrow traps in the original Spelunky. If it passes over an arrow trap, what if it re-equipped it with an arrow? So that would make where it moves in the level dangerous again. You're like, oh, not only do I want it to touch the gems, I don't want it to touch this. And that just adds like another interesting wrinkle to what would otherwise be a very static, boring, repetitive strategy. So another idea is, what if the ghost speeds up every gem it touches, or if it interacts with other elements, if it speeds up no matter what element it touches? That would be interesting, because even though the ghost is deterministic, it's predictable, it's slow, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's not very dangerous or scary to players. But if it speeds up every time it touches a gem, that's a very clear risk-reward balance. Reward, more and more points. Risk, ghost gets more and more speed, so as you get more and more, the risk also increases, and that's the very basic way that we analyze risk reward with game design. Is it harder to get more rewarding stuff? And the way it's designed now, the ghost doesn't get any harder for the start of the game to the end of the game, and you get more and more rewards for slowly guiding it across gems in ghosting. Another idea is the ghost's increased speed persists from level to level. So let's say that the ghost does speed up when it touches a gem. Then the next level you encounter the ghost, after the 2.5 minute mark, it's at that new speed. So throughout a run, the more you ghost, the more dangerous it becomes. And if you keep thinking along these lines, it'd be interesting if the ghost kept developing more, not just more speed, because eventually the ghost would be too fast, but what if it developed into more complex AI or more dangerous movement, or its hitbox is changed, or its size changed, or something crazy, so that the more you ghost, by the end of the game, the ghost is the scariest final boss instead of King Yama or whatever that it currently is. And that's an idea, I'm just throwing it out there. But the last idea is kind of like what I was saying with idea number 3. If the ghost's movement got more complex and less predictable the longer it was out on a single stage, whether or not this persists throughout the entire game, that would also be interesting. So it's not just about ghosting and running the strategy for 7 minutes without much of a change at all. It's if I can't get the ghost to do what I want within a relatively short amount of time, like 30 seconds or a minute, the ghost becomes more erratic, more unpredictable, less sort of fair in that sense, less deterministic. So that would be a clear way the player could gauge risk reward. Like, do I really want to try my luck and try to outmaneuver this ghost when it's getting more and more crazy, or do I just want to cut my losses, leave a few gems behind, and move on to the next level? That's just a neat idea I'm throwing out. But as you can see, just by changing the way the ghost is designed, just the enemy, one enemy in the entire game, you can effectively change the way that high score runs happen and how players plan ahead for the ghosting strategy, and how ghosting can become more interesting as the game goes along, so that players, viewers, everyone watching and going along with that experience can be like, I wonder what's going to happen next. What is the player going to do to get out of the next level of sort of ghost evolution, if you will? And that's far more interesting than watching a 3 hour and 11 minute run where the player is essentially just tricking an enemy that's about as smart as a Goomba. Like, Goombas are a little dumb because they'll walk off the stage and they'll die, but this ghost is essentially what a Boo from Mario. And I mean, it's a ghost, so I guess that makes a lot of sense, but it needs to be a lot more interesting. If you want to know more about what I think on Spelunky and all the sort of specifics that I'm kind of flying through at a fast pace, I wrote 2 articles for you to check out. On my blog, I'll put links down in the description, but I'm going to show you in the hard copies because I think that's a cool thing to do. February 17th, 2009, I wrote this article called Spelunky, a game design goldmine, and in it I detail all these different, the core design of Spelunky. I made this like crazy chart that talks about which elements are more core to its gameplay and how it layers that up. I talk about enemy elements down at the bottom. Those are a bunch of enemies from the original Game Maker pixel art game. I talk about level elements. I talk about procedural generation. I talk about some of the fair and unfair parts about it. And that's just a really good way to just understand how Spelunky works and what it is. And since then, many years later, in my 3rd volume of my blog that I printed out, I wrote a follow-up article when the Xbox Live version came out, which is the version I'm showing you on PC today. And this article is called Spelunky XBLA Xbox Live Arcade, XBLA Review Cash for Gold Part 1. So it's a 2-part follow-up where I talk about all the new features and the slight changes in design between the original Spelunky version and this new version, and and those cool little toys that Derek Yu made for Spelunky. I happened to meet Derek Yu at GDC one year and he gave me one, so I got this cool little like snake and totem head, which is really cool. I kind of wanted the black guy, the Diggersby though, but my luck wasn't with me. But essentially in this follow-up article, I talk all about Spelunky's balance and all the nuanced ways that the particular design decisions end up making the game sort of less and less skill-based, less and less fair, how it has this problem with its power-up design in creating gameplay challenges, and there's really only one right way to play Spelunky, and figuring out what that is, it takes a lot of trial and error to get to it. And despite me really liking this game, I really think it's a cool game, there are lingering issues like that, and if you want to know more about it, you can read that article. So yeah, those are my thoughts on ghosting and Spelunky. Not a fan. I think it drags things out too much. I think there's so many more interesting ideas to tackle. I think it's emblematic of a core problem that exists within Spelunky itself, so I don't think it's too much of a contrast between what Spelunky is already. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas people can play around with, but as it stands now, no thanks, and please don't put that into my games, because I'd rather risk it all and lose it all than to have the most viable strategy be so slow, so boring, and so low skilled. So yeah, thanks for watching. This has been Design Over Time, episode 5, I believe, but it's the one at the start of the week. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Also in the description are all the articles that I mentioned, and you can follow me on Twitter at KirbyKid, and please follow Design Oriented. It's at Design Oriented as well. Follow this channel for daily updates, and if you get your questions in before the end of the week, I will try to answer them on air. If not, I will answer them directly where you ask them. So Twitter or the YouTube comments are the best way to get me questions. And I will see you guys on the next episode of Design Over Time.